Hi, it's Brett from thirstgym.com. Today we're going to talk about how to design your conjugate program, specifically with the max effort upper method. So we've covered in previous videos the max effort lower method. I've got that linked in the description box below, so you can check it out of how we set up the max effort lower system for the conjugate system. But today we're going to talk about specifically the max effort aspect of the conjugate system. So what we're going to talk about here is our quick setup and what our goal is. And like our max effort lower, the main goal today with our max effort upper for powerlifting is the bench press. So anything that's going to help improve your 1 rep max on the bench press for powerlifting. And again, we're going to kind of talk about the intermediate lifter here and how I use the conjugate system to help develop your bench press. So to kind of talk about how we did with our squat, we're going to kind of talk about what are the main needs of our bench press for the raw lifter. And initially that's going to be your triceps, your pecs, and your lats or your upper back. That's what's going to help develop a good strong bench press, and then also some shoulder work. And we're going to talk about how we're going to do and lay all this out. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is going to be our main movement for the day. And just like with squat, I like to perform a 1 to 3 rep max and ideally more of a 3 rep max. So we're gonna have a 1 to 3 RM for the day. And the reason, again, like I talked about in the squat video, is that the reason I like the 3 rep max is because that's usually gonna be in the 90 to 92.5% range of your 1 rep max, more chances than not. So you're still gonna be able to touch 90% even if you hit that hard triple, which is the goal of the max effort system. For the conjugate system or the max effort method is to touch a heavy weight. So for our first exercise, I'm gonna kind of look at a raw lifter that's weak off the chest. That's very common. That's what most people are usually trying to improve, is their strength off their chest. So we want a main movement that touches that. And so for a lot of my lifters, I like things like Spoto presses, Larson presses, incline bench, floor press if they happen to have shorter arms like myself. If they got longer arms, I don't usually use the floor press as much as the main movement. I like a 1 board press. I like benching against bands or chains for 1 rep maxes. All those are viable things to use to build strength off the chest. So just to make this nice and simple here, we're gonna pick the bench press versus chains, okay, for our main movement. And specifically, these are gonna be around 25% of your 1 rep max. So you got to kind of figure out what that chain weight is. But for most people, this is going to be 2 to 4 chains per side, depending upon your strength level. So we're going to do that. And we're going to do that for our 3 rep max, just like with our squat, our max effort lower. We're going to work to a heavy triple for the day. And again, we're going to do that at an RPE of 9. And again, this RPE range can change depending upon where you're at, kind of where your current training cycle is. RPE 9 is a good place to stay. So you got a little bit left in the tank, but it's still going to be heavy enough that you're probably still going to be in this 90% range, more cases than not, unless you really sandbag the RPE here. And then again, just like with my squat pattern, I really like to emphasize back down sets. And again, this is usually going to be 2 to 3 sets of back downs. And again, these are usually at an RPE of 8. Not always, but usually somewhere around there. They can go up to 9 and they can even be as low as 7, but usually I'm sticking around that 8 area. And from a rep perspective, we're usually looking at 2 to 4 reps for this back down perspective so that we can gauge and get some volume from an exercise that we're not strong at. So the nice thing about the chains is they're still gonna train all the way to the chest. We're still gonna work on that speed, that pop off our chest, and the chains are gonna overload our triceps so that we're having to train through that full strength curve. So this would be a good way of how I'm gonna dictate this. So then we could just say 2 to 4 at an RPE of 8 for our main work, okay? So that's kind of how I would lay out my bench press, my main movement, just like my squat. Nothing really changes there. You just gotta know where you're at. So, and I'm just like with the other video that I did as well, I'm gonna kind of keep a running go here of what my main stuff is. So I'm gonna do it over here this time. So I like to abbreviate a lot. Versus chains, and we're gonna do a 3 RM at RPE 9, and then we'll say 2 by 3 at a RPE of 8, okay? So that's kind of my main work. So next we're gonna go with my secondary motion here. So if I'm weak off the chest, I want to do something that addresses this. So what I either do here is I either pick a close grip variation, especially if it's a tricep issue. So if I'm seeing people just don't use their triceps well in their bench press, then I like to go with a close grip option here. If they're doing okay from a tricep perspective, I'll keep the grip the same. So we're just gonna say, since I've got chains on here, they're probably doing okay from a tricep perspective. We're trying to just overload things here. So for here, I'm gonna mix this up and say we're gonna go with a spoto press. And again, this is gonna teach tightness off the chest, okay? So if we're weak off the chest with this example, this is gonna be here, and I might even use this as like a 2 count, okay? So I might overemphasize that pause off the chest. So we're talking about just an inch, inch and a half off the chest. So we're gonna do a 2 count. And again, here what I like to do is usually work up to 1 top set or do about 2 to 3 working sets, depending what they need. So if size is an issue, they're undersized, we just need more size, then I'm gonna usually pick 2 to 3 sets of 5 to 8 reps if they're undersized. Okay, if this is somebody that's already at a good size and we just need to improve strength, then I'm usually just gonna work up to a top set of anywhere from 3 to 6 reps, 3 to 6 reps, and that's usually gonna be at an RPE of 7 to 9, okay? So I make sure I leave a little bit in the tank. We're gonna work up to 1 top set, and that's really just gonna try to get some intensity out of this workload, and I'll explain that why in a little bit, okay? So the big thing here, determine what you need, size or strength. If you're in your weight class where you need to be, you don't need to add a whole lot of appreciable mass to your frame to increase your strength. You're just needing the neurological adaptations or the myofibular adaptations. Then you want to kind of make sure you're staying here, the 3 to 6 range. If size what you need, you can push these reps, or if you're in like a deep off season and you're trying to get some more volume, then you can do 2 to 3 sets of 5 to 8 reps, and that's gonna give you more time under tension. The big thing here is you're probably gonna wanna have these RPEs actually more in that like 6 to 8 range. Leave a little bit in the tank, you don't wanna push the intensity as much. So what we're gonna say here, we're gonna go with a spoto press, and we're just gonna say a top set of 5 at RPE 8.5. That's gonna be our main work for our supplemental movement, okay? So now we're gonna have our next exercise, and our C1 exercise is usually going to be something that I like to call a heavy tricep extension or a heavy extension exercise. So what I mean by this is that we want this to come directly from the triceps primarily, but it's gonna be heavier, okay? This isn't press downs. We're talking about rolling tricep extensions. We're talking about skull crushers, both barbell and dumbbell options. This can be dips. These are pretty heavy extensions. We can do JM press. I even like a neutral grip dumbbell bench press or a floor press. That also works as well. You're gonna train the triceps a lot more. It's not as a heavy extension, but if you want more pressing volume, this is a good place to put that as a tertiary exercise here. But these are usually kind of my go-tos, all right? And then from a set and rep perspective, I usually do 3 to 4 sets. And because this is heavier, I usually do 8 to 12 reps. Okay, I'm really trying to train the hypertrophy side here of the triceps, really kind of attack this from the head on. And this is, I mean, really when I look at all my programs, these are kind of where I stick. I really don't veer outside of these a whole lot. So as long as you're checking something heavy tricep related, you're gonna be good. Just for this example, we're gonna say, so this lifter's weak off the chest, we're gonna say dips, okay? That way we get a little bit of extra chest work, but we're gonna say 3 by 8 to 10, okay? So we're gonna give a rep range so that we can allow a little bit of auto regulation there. But again, as long as you're kind of in that area that I mentioned, that 8 to 12, you're gonna be good, okay? Now my next exercise, okay, I like to keep this as a tricep heavy accessory day. So I like to pick another tricep exercise here with higher reps, but so we still want to stay in tricep. I'll just make sure it's down. It's tricep here, but this can vary a little bit, okay? So here's where you can go back to some of those exercises that we did, but you can also add in press downs. You can add in overhead extensions. You can add in dips here again. You can add in push-ups. These are one I'm kind of popular with. You could add in like a dip machine. I'm trying to think of some other things here. These are kind of like my go-tos in this area. The other option here, if you really are weak off your chest, the other option here would be pecs. Okay, and I'm not super big on direct pec training for a lot of my athletes until I feel like there's an issue, but this is where you then can start to put your fly variations. You can put deficit push-ups, which is kind of like my go-to. Those are gonna kind of be your main two things. Or you can even do like a machine chest press. That works as well. And the goal here with this option is to go 2 to 4 sets. So you got quite a bit of options to regulate, but we're gonna go anywhere from 10 to 20 reps in this area. So we've got a lot more volume, okay? So since this particular athlete needs strength off the chest, and I've already got some extra chest work here, I'm gonna kind of ignore the pec aspect, but let's just say if this, let's say was a skull crusher of some kind, then if they're weak off the chest, then I might go with a pec option, okay? So you kind of got some options here, but I really like dips as a tertiary exercise. And then as my D1 here, we're gonna go with a more tricep dominant exercise here. I've already got dips, push-ups, dips machines. Here, what we're gonna do, another option here, the tape press. So we're gonna actually go with an incline tape press. And I'm gonna say 3 by 15, okay? So that's gonna be very tricep heavy. And then now that moves us on to our last kind of couple things. So again, bench, supplemental, tertiary or our main accessory exercise, secondary exercise, and then what I like to do here is I like to, again, pick 2 exercises. Usually it's gonna be a high rep. So my E1 is usually high rep tricep, okay? And then my E2 is usually upper back or shoulders, depending upon what you need. So for the high rep, this kind of goes back to like our tricep exercise. So again, this is usually pretty press down heavy, if I'm being honest, or overhead extension. So we'll say band press downs here. And what I like to usually do is give either rep ranges. So here, I'm usually looking at 15 to 30 reps, or I hit total reps. So I'll talk about that here in a second. And then upper back and shoulders, this could be your face pulls. Face pull, this could be pull aparts. This could be, you could even do lat pull downs here. You could do pec decks, reverse pec deck rather, reverse pec decks. You could do rear delt raises. Any kind of rear delt work honestly checks the box. Anything like that, okay? So for here, since I've got band press downs, we're gonna actually make band face pull as well, just to kind of keep it simple, okay? I'm gonna erase this. So we kind of got that idea where we're going. And since I've got these figured out, we're gonna say we're gonna do 100 total reps, and we're gonna do 100 total reps here. And then this is gonna basically be supersetted, obviously, because of the E1, E2, and we'll just say no rest. Okay, so you're gonna go back and forth. You're just gonna do press down so you get a burn, face pull so you get a burn, back and forth until you get 100 total reps as little time as possible. And as you can see, that's laid out our max effort upper session. Okay, now that we've got our max effort upper session laid out, let's kind of briefly recap what we're after here and what we're looking to achieve when we're making our max effort upper training. So the first exercise, you're gonna wanna pick some kind of heavy press option. If obviously you're a power lifter, that's probably gonna be a bench press variation. You can use an overhead press or an incline press, and I use the incline semi-frequently, but the big thing here is to use the bench press as your main movement and then attack where you're weak. So again, those variations can vary a lot, right? But again, the big thing I like here, again, 3 rep maxes and giving myself an RPE cap. But at the end of the day, this can be a 1 to 3 RM, just like normal conjugate training that Louis Simmons has laid out, okay? And the back down for me is optional. I really like 2 to 3 sets at the absolute most. I got triples here, but again, these can be doubles, these can be sets of 4, these can be sets of 5. Just all kind of depends on what you need. If you're just after the strength, keep them on the lower end. Doubles, triples tend to work best. And again, just leave some reps in the tank. Then we've got, if this lifter's weak off the chest, then a spoto press is really good. Again, we're talking about size here for them. We're telling you we're gonna work up the top set of 5 RPE and a half. Again, if you need size, you just do more volume of work. You just keep your RPE down a little bit so you get a good amount of time and attention to build some tissue. Otherwise, work up to a top set and you're gonna feel fine. And then you've got your accessory work. And again, I really like to check the pecs and the triceps pretty heavy, as well as some extra upper back work. So dips, incline take press, press downs, and phase pulls are accessory work I have for the day. And this day's pretty tricep heavy. And the main reason here, I'm gonna kind of talk about why we do this. So from my perspective of the training week, if we've got max effort lower here, and let's just say we've got an off day, and then we've got max effort upper here, okay, so let's just say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, okay, I've got a little bit of rest here, but these are 2 pretty heavy days, so this is gonna be pretty intensively heavy. I can bet that this is going to affect how I feel on this day, and especially if you do these back to back. So trying to hit what I can here, keeping my accessory work almost lighter, like this isn't as taxing if I did like a bunch of back work, but also ultimately, we've got to remember, we've got a dynamic effort lower day that's coming later in the week. So if we're gonna do that, and we're still gonna squat and deadlift on this day, which we will get to in a next video, I don't want my max effort upper day affecting my dynamic effort lower day. Now, there's usually enough space that from a lower body perspective, I'm not gonna have to worry about that. But if we're talking about my traps, my lats, my mid back, all of that is tight from being set in my bench press appropriately, but then I put back work here, this could affect the way that my deadlift starts to feel, and I really try to avoid that by limiting the amount of back work that I do on my max effort upper day and focusing on my triceps, because my triceps are not going to affect how my dynamic effort lower feels, and ultimately, not only from a muscle perspective, but from a central nervous system perspective, the only taxing thing I have here is the bench press, and the bench press isn't as taxing as the squat or the deadlift. You can bench press pretty frequently and at higher intensities without it affecting how you're gonna feel for a squat and a deadlift. But that's not true for the squat and the deadlift and how it affects your bench press. So again, that's why I like to ideally have a day in between my max effort days so I can maximize that time. But then if I have to have a dynamic effort lower, I'm not worried about my max effort upper affecting my dynamic effort lower. And then ultimately, my max effort upper isn't gonna affect my dynamic effort upper, because again, that's gonna have enough natural space built in through the week that I'm gonna be okay. And then even ultimately, if I have my dynamic effort upper, and this is pretty back intensive, which again, I will talk about in a future video, usually this day is gonna have 1 to 2 days of rest before it comes back to my max effort lower, so that I've got enough rest here. And usually if there's a days that you're gonna kind of pinch together, it's gonna be around the middle of the week rather than, or, you know, there's always at least plenty of room between the max effort lower, but not necessarily on the dynamic effort lower. Hopefully that makes sense, that these gaps are generally smaller than these gaps. That's how I'm looking at the overall training outcome. Now you can certainly change this. If you like to have a big gap between your max effort days, let's say this is on a Friday and this is on like a Tuesday, then by all means, you could certainly make that fit, right? And you can put more back work here. But I'm just thinking long-term about the training week and where I've got these accessory work planned and how I'm picking my exercises. And that's ultimately what drove me to this model and this method of how I chose the accessory work, is thinking about the days that are coming of training. I'm trying to think how I can maximize this, but I still make progress on my bench press, but I still got room for my dynamic effort lower day that I'm not hindering that day from a back perspective, all right? Went off long enough about that. Again, just like with the squat, these exercises are gonna feed up the chain, okay? So upper back and tricep work is gonna help feed into more tricep work, to more tricep and chest work, and then this is gonna help me with my spoto press, and my spoto press is ultimately gonna help me with my bench press versus chains, which is then ultimately gonna help me with my bench press. So again, your accessory work feeds up the chain. It's gonna ultimately help you hit what you need to hit. The big thing with your accessory work here is that your accessory work, almost your reps go up as you're going down the chain, and that's gonna make sure that you touch plenty of different ranges of rep work, but you're attacking what's important most from a myofibular hypertrophy perspective early on, and then as you go on, you're doing more sarcoplasmic work, and then also, this is gonna promote blood flow and recovery and kind of just make sure we get a good pump and we feel good. The last thing I'm gonna cover here is, Brandon, what about delt work? What about direct shoulder work for my bench press? Here's what I recommend. If your tricep work is as strong as you think it is, then what you can do is you can either add an extra delt exercise here, okay, which is totally good. I do this a lot with several athletes, or you can completely nix this, and then now you just have shoulder work, and you're gonna say, this is enough tricep work for me. And or, if you really wanna try to spread it out, you could add one tricep exercise, you could add a tricep exercise to your dynamic effort upper that you normally wouldn't have, and you can spread that volume out a little bit, and you can get more shoulder work here. So that's how I would do the shoulder work, and obviously anything from lateral raises, front raises, seated dumbbell power cleans, external rotation work, anything like that, even some light overhead press machine work, that all works great. And same thing with the direct pec work too. If you really need to check direct pec work, again, I would probably have like a dumbbell bench press here, or a deficit push-up would be down here, and I would hit this with a harder extension, so I'm still training my pecs a little bit. Or you can add your flies in here as well. So this could be your skull crushers, and then this would essentially be your dumbbell fly, and you would literally plug and chug. Put your skull crushers for 8 to 10, your flies for 3 sets of 15, and you're gonna check all the boxes you need to check. So at the end of the day, the big thing you understand is where I need to improve, and you're gonna kind of fill in with all these gaps. But as long as you understand your max effort, your supplemental work, you're gonna pick a heavy extension-based exercise. Then from here, you kind of pick and choose what you need. I like more tricep work, but if you need more flies, you need more shoulders, you need more upper back work, you fill this gap in with what you need to help your bench press. If you got any questions, please let me know in the comment section below. I'll make sure in the next video next week, we're gonna touch on the dynamic effort lower system and how we use that to push not only our squat, but our deadlift. This is where I make my biggest changes to the conjugate system. If you got any questions, let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.